Uh, but sometimes just to train your attention and release, those spots that I've been talking about in this guiding, you keep coming back to them. The spine, the cranium, the jaw, all of this just can release with almost no movement, just opening. And that can open the mind as though into a very still pool of water. So this stretching just reminded me of all of that. And this experience of seeing this remarkable Japanese Roshi with absolutely no pretense or guile, or just generously in his robes. Somebody brought a zabuton and a zafu, and he was on the floor actually lifting his robes and showing, I didn't know, the sort of white leggings that he had on under his robes, and showing what he was doing with his legs. And of course, he sat in full lotus since he was probably 2. And I don't know, but that's his way. But he also showed half lotus and quarter. And so this is another reason why, for those of you who are newer to this and may not have had a lot of pointers on how to sit, one thing I know is that if you're sitting on a cushion on the floor, it's very important to sit near the front edge of the cushion, like front third of it. And if you really have long legs, for example, or a lack of flexibility, so you can sit on a cushion but your knees are up, it's better to sit higher and more forward and get the knees down, so you have a real tripod, 3 points of contact. Or go to a taller cushion, a block, and kneel, or a bench. But you want, unless, some people have curvature of the spine issues. If you don't have a major issue, you want the belly to sort of naturally fall forward a little, and the lower back to have that natural curve in it. And that just lifts up the spine and supports it. So it feels really kind of suspended on this, and without having to be held up. If that curve goes, everything is kind of under strain. So posture, breathing, and stilling the mind. It's remarkable. This whole practice is traced back to Shakyamuni Buddha some 2,500 years ago, in that remarkable story of his life, his pursuit, when he has these, leaves the palace. He, so to speak, escapes the palace with his charioteer, his guardian, his servant, and sees human suffering and old age, sickness, death, and a sage. He couldn't have fathomed it before that. And so starts this search and has this, finds the middle way. Remarkable awakening that comes down to us. In a sense, we are sitting in that. It's not to say that he was the first person ever to discover this world, but he set this in motion. He did discover it thoroughly. And then, in about, I don't know, 600 Bodhidharma, this great sage who's 100 years old, it's said, when he makes this journey from India to China, and sits facing the wall for 9 years. And that's where we really get this Chan, this silent sitting practice. I mean, the sutras are full of teaching. The sutras from Shakyamuni Buddha, handed down orally and then written down. But Bodhidharma brought it to China. And then we get this whole series of Chinese masters, a few women, and then many women who don't make the record. And then comes this Mahayana tradition, which Sambo Zen is part of, the Bodhisattva way. I saw there's a question about love, so sort of aims in that direction, this practicing for the awakening of the whole world, really for the sake of others. Somehow recognizing that your own practice cannot but matter for the whole world. That is not, from my point of view, a put down of the Theravadan tradition, which is full of richness. And, you cannot really pull them apart so neatly anyway. But this one aspect of Mahayana that comes to us so clearly in the figure of Kannon Kuan Yin, the hearer of the cries of the world, this suffering compassion is really one thing, one word, inseparable. So, that took me off farther than I intended, but we've had time maybe for a few more questions. So why don't I just start with the one that came in first, and then I'll turn to you, Dan. This person says, I have two questions. First, do koans have different answers for different students? Or will students come to the same answers naturally? My first response was yes. That's cheap. When you get into the koans, I understand the language of answers because they seem like questions that, in our natural language is when you're asked a question, you give an answer. But koans, the answer is, the question is really show me. They're evoking this world, this real world of wisdom and compassion, this boundlessness that is so dynamic, gone, one, nothing at all, and yet here we are, that world. And each one is all of it. In the tradition, it's said that this most famous, perhaps, koan Mu, it's often called a master key. So, you really somehow are penetrated by Mu. I prefer that to penetrating Mu. Penetrated by it. Something happens in the course of that practice, in the course of becoming intimate with Mu, that this I that I talked about just a little earlier, this I, me, mine, this I at the center of our experience, that we sort of set up there and then defend, that disappears. It does. It's just And how that happens is absolutely no telling and unique for each person, though there are recognizable, it's very recognizable when it happens, very recognizable, uh, especially in the context of practice with a teacher within a tradition. Um, so it's, you know, this, that I slips away, and this oneness world. You know, the tradition I've heard, Brion Roshi, Yamada Kon Roshi, other people have said you can't really see this oneness uh, that in some sense seems more native to us, you know, because it's so clear everything's interconnected. But this one boundlessness, one seamless existence, you know, just one, like Shakyamuni Buddha says, you know, upon awakening, I and the great earth and all sentient beings awaken, attain the way. There's just one. From the top of heaven to the bottom of the earth, I alone. But that I is not Shakyamuni Buddha, except to the extent that it's the only I there is. There's just one. And it's easier for us to get that one, but the teachers, the masters, they say you can't really fully, freely grasp that till this disappearing. Maybe just a flash of it, but really disappearing, falling away. Dogen called it. Body and mind fallen away. When that happens, then that's oneness is just comes rushing in. So about koans, you know, they have what many of them have, not all of them. Many of them have what I've heard called. I don't really like this term, so pedantic. A textbook answer. You know, there's something that the koan actually forces you to do. It just does. And sometimes a student will come up with something that's not that, but it's so apparent that they're understanding, that they're seeing, they're really in this world, that it's just like, that's fine. And then maybe also help to turn it in a way that they can appreciate, taste this way that kind of falls with the koan. Other koans really know that, you know, there are 10,000 ways you could show them. Uh, it's a very dynamic and a wonderful aspect of working over a long period of time with a teacher is that they, you know, I've now, for example, been through the compendium of koans for the Sambo Zen tradition formally all the way through 3 times, and then, you know, others and just here and there, many others. And it's different every time, even with the same teacher. So while there is this, what we call a hand in glove fit, you know, a lot of the koans, they just, there's a box and its lid, the tradition says, there's just a fit that comes up. Some people describe it as it comes up when you're working with a koan, or it falls on me, some people say. It just, you know, that will happen. But then there are myriad ways of expressing what it's about. Yeah, it's so dynamic. The other question asked is, when we breathe while sitting, should the breath be silent or a little more forceful and audible? Yeah, I feel for sure when you're sitting with others, it should be silent. And I think there's no loss for the person's intensity, the person who's sitting and maybe inclined to make sound. There's nothing lost by, you know, having that be so internal that it's not audible. The old school, not that old, back in the 60s in Japan at Sesshin, people who were what they called the mujis, all the students sitting with mu were allowed to and then at night they would go outside on the grounds and cry out, call out mu. That happened at monasteries, that has really changed. If you're interested in experimenting on your own, sure. But I would really have your regular practice be deeply attuned to silent sitting, so that when you sit with others, you're not having to make an adjustment. And I just also the sitting gets so deep and the space is so large. It's just not necessary. There's so much energy. If that's coming up to, wow, what if that's just, like Vimala Kirti's thunderous silence. He showed Zazen and he was absolutely silent. And it was heard round the world. Okay, Dan.
Okay, first question. Questioner asks, can you define choiceless awareness?
This is what I was talking about a little bit this morning. I think that might have gone by quickly, but the space of the unconditioned. So absolutely non-judgmental. Whatever arises is simply that. And there's no good or bad. There's no near or far. It's a kind of equanimity. It's a phrase that I think really describes this open awareness sitting very well. It also resonates with that famous first line of the Shinjin Mei, that great verse by Sozan. Starts out, the great way is not difficult. This way, this Zen way is not difficult if only you do not pick and choose. So actually, when the way opens up, more and more you realize it's not that it's up to us not to pick and choose. Or one translation is it's not difficult, it just dislikes picking and choosing. It just doesn't work out. Actually, you can't. You can't really pick and choose. I mean, whatever one sound, one gesture, even one thought, in this way, that's all there is. There's no comparing. There's actually a lovely poem that I had thought I might read later, but it's short and it's by Sylvia Ostertag. That's why it came to mind so quickly. It's in the same little volume where she's exactly talking about this with regard to this instruction in sitting that comes to us from a great master Yaksan and then through Dogen, where Dogen is teaching his monks, writing to his monks how to sit. And he has this, detailed paragraph about posture and breathing and what to do with your eyes, I mean, all the details. And then he sort of rhetorically asks himself, and then what? You get yourself totally arranged, you do the little rocking, you've got your eyes, you've got where to put your tongue. He says, think non-thinking, or think not thinking. How do you do that? And then comes this little phrase, non-thinking, with a dash, a hyphen, non-thinking. Well, anybody who's sat for any amount of time can surely guess. I mean, not thinking at all would be flatlining. So this non-thinking is a kind of open awareness where thoughts may arise, but you don't stick to them at all. So that's a kind of a cue about no picking or choosing. There's just nothing that tracks after them. You don't put two beads together. So here's this little poem, maybe it'll help, by Sylvia Ostertag, called Not Thinking. Sitting in silence is a way to enter a state of mind in which we rest in the space of the unconditioned. That's choiceless awareness. If we have found such a state, we recognize that we have always rested in this space of the unconditioned. But how can we reach this state? Just now, the best we can do is not to think about it. Then what? Really, the best we can do now is not thinking. Not thinking is an action. You do not believe it? Then you are not yet doing it. No sooner do you do it, not thinking, than resting in the space of the unconditioned takes place. This space of the unconditioned, this choiceless awareness, it's just things as they are, exactly as they are. One of the teachings that has touched me again and again, I've seen it most from Ryoun Roshi, it's his way. He'll take up his stick and say, Zen is to let this stick be a stick. I mean, there is nothing pedantic about that. It has everything to do with this real world, with this I alone. Right? In the face of this stick, actually, you're gone. And there's a beauty that you have to taste. But I've quoted before this Bigako Sato saying, people can't tolerate beauty these days. People these days can't tolerate beauty. And he went on talking about something, and I tucked that in, and sitting with it, just reflecting on it. Actually, it's because to really see something as it is, you disappear. It's that separate self, that I as over against that, doesn't hold up. So all of that is having to do with this very beautiful phrase, choiceless awareness. If you're able to sit with that, that's good sitting, really good sitting.
Okay, next question. I've heard about the Dantian and some reading. Would you comment?
All I know about this, I believe, is that it has to do with chi, um, and I'm sorry to even that's a desecration. I really don't know much about it. I'd be happy. I'm now, I love these questions because they send me off doing some research. Um, but if it is about chi, I've learned about that in the most beautiful, simple way from guided movement at Mountain Cloud and other places, um, and qigong. Studying that, and um, I've done a little study of the chakras, and I think that might be related. But I can't say anything of help there. If I learn something before tomorrow, I'll circle back.
Okay, next question. Questioner asks, lately I've been coming to believe that love is the real practice, just being loving. Quite a challenge at times. PS to my previous question, also asking for help.
Yeah. Um, this is something I have had in heart mind to really focus on tomorrow in a talk that's yet to be born. But as this teacher that I mentioned earlier, Ruben Habito, uh, early on in his when he became a teacher and began to write books, he's fantastic, both a scholar and a Zen master. Um, he describes Zen. He kind of defined it as what was it? Tasting the dynamic reality of each present moment, or awakening to the dynamic reality of each present moment. And now, most recently, he said, Zen is loving everything all the time. Um, I think that's helpful. Henry's calling it original love, this actual world where people plant bombs and storm the Capitol and, you know, hate and kill, uh, and hearts break, and, all of it. Great good deeds, great kindness, a choiceless awareness. Like there's no, it's, if you really taste this one body, that those people climbing the wall at the Capitol, that image is so vivid right now. Uh, that's my own leg at to really get that. I think love is, love with no opposite. Obviously, there's nothing sweet about it. Uh, but I think it's a powerful pointer. Original love, infinite love. Um, I remember years ago being in Japan. It was such a wonderful gift opportunity, and I spent some weeks in this little zendo, sitting often with a few other people and Ryon Roshi. Every morning, every evening, and he would do two sits with us and a round of kinhin in between, which he basically does that alone every day. So you just came over and did it with us in his robes, early and late. And the last night, I was, it was just a few of us in this beautiful small Zindo, and I was walking behind him with great respect at a distance in this walking meditation with, this posture that I showed earlier. And my eye was sort of just naturally falling on his ankle. He happened to be barefoot. So his long robe, and then I could see just the smooth, pale skin of his narrow ankle. And I just, without really thinking, it was just, what is that? What is that? It was so beautiful. And, the clappers sounded and went back, sat down on my cushion, and the bell rang. And immediately what came up was, love with no substance. Somehow just seemed best fit. So this loving everything all the time, I think that's a fantastic light, guide, pointer. And it's not like that's out there, that tall order, and I'm here. No, it's what you are. So the invitation for us is to realize that. There's not the big gap we might imagine is just not there. It's we suffer it, we really do. But what this solvent that I was talking about, this sitting, in time, it just wears away that delusive gap. Or you suddenly see that was just a mirage, and everything comes rushing in. It's you. Okay.
Okay, next question. Looks like we have a couple left. After some consistent daily practice, is there a routine or ritual that helps maintain the beginner's mind attitude towards practice? I find my attention wandering more the longer I practice.
Actually, coupling that with beginner's mind is a really good instinct. That is the best antidote. I mean, we really are beginning. Really, this is it. Also, this, as Suzuki said, Roshi, this moment is not preparation for some other moment. If we could just see this is it, I think we'd be rather riveted, curious, awake, aware, alive, alert. This is it. And so, I thought that I may talk a little bit about the hindrances tomorrow, the 5 hindrances, but you're naming a couple of them there. What one is perhaps, Henry often calls it sleepiness, drowsiness, but the old school way is sloth and torpor, where we just kind of, And then the next one is restlessness. And, those, of course, are just two sides of the same coin. And either one can sort of just take us away from this now. I just listened to a talk of his. I thought it was so wonderful. It recently posted on the Mountain Cloud website. I think the title is Firsthand Experience. And it's, he's into the Heart Sutra ever so slowly. And in that talk, he was talking about sort of the remedy or the antidote, or that these hindrances are really they they don't feel good, and they weigh on us. They divert us from practice, but they can also be gateways. They can be transformed. And so he came up with what he felt at that time of that talk was a kind of fitting antidote to each of them. And the ones that I remember right now best are for this restlessness. He thought the antidote is compassion. And for the last one, which is doubt, small doubt myself, doubt this is the way, doubt the teacher, doubt the teaching, uh, those kinds of doubts, surrender. Then I mean, I think at the end of the day, a really magnificent antidote to our little doubts is the great doubt. Really don't know. Doubt everything you think you know. Just really not knowing, no knowing. Then the present moment suddenly starts to flash up. Is there time for one more?
Okay, looks like we have time. Last question. Since my practice thus far has been Vipassana, can you offer any guidance for introducing a koan such as Mu into the practice? Or do we need to be assigned a koan from a teacher?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, it's not so unusual to have somebody so eager to work with Mu that they read enough and hear enough like this and just sort of start sitting with it. But the tradition, and there is, as one who has received this koan and given it, that's a kind of stellar moment, and it's just a ritual, I couldn't say just. I'll never forget the moment that I received Mu, and I feel like that's important. Also, if you're going to work with a koan, Mu, or there are others. What is this? Who am I? Who hears? It's really better to have some contact on a fairly regular basis with a teacher. It doesn't have to be weekly, but it has to be consistent. I feel, that the koan study really is intertwined with having a guide. Uh, that that's my feeling, and that's Sambo tradition, but not only. It's kind of wisdom in that, and it's not because this is off limits. No, you know, there's nothing off limits in terms of what you read or reflect on, and you know, or do with one's own practice. But the tradition is that when you take up koan study, you do it with a teacher. And my experience is there's a wisdom in that. I can't say that when students come having kind of just eagerly unable to keep from sitting with Mu, and I've given them Mu, I've still felt that there's something going on in that exchange. So in other words, it hasn't diluted that possibility of then really receiving the koan and entering into a relationship with the teacher. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for these questions. I was all ready to just give you another talk. So it's very nice. Thank you.